You are the salt of the earth, but if salt has lost its taste, how shall its saltiness be restored? It is no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled under people's feet. You are the light of the world. A city set on a hill cannot be hidden, nor do people light a lamp and put it under a basket, but on a stand, and it gives light to all in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father who is in heaven. Do not think that I've come to abolish the law or the prophets. I have not come to abolish them, but to fulfill them. For truly I say to you, until heaven and earth pass away, not an iota, not a dot, will pass from the law until all is accomplished. Therefore, whoever relaxes one of the least of these commandments and teaches others to do the same will be called least in the kingdom of heaven. But whoever does them and teaches them will be called great in the kingdom of heaven. For I tell you, unless your righteousness exceeds that of the scribes and the Pharisees, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. The word of the Lord. You may be seated. What is so horrible is when we often read the Bible and we see things in it the wrong way. We see things that aren't there in it. It reminds me of the old scene from the episode of the Dick Van Dyke Show. There's an episode where they're at an art auction, and they get to talking amongst themselves about how they always put plants in there to give secret signs to the art auctioners so that the prices on the art objects get driven up. And so they're all kind of talking amongst themselves like, oh, what happens if I adjust my glasses, or what happens if I touch my ear? And they don't realize it, but they're accidentally giving signs to the art auctioneer, and before they know it, they've accidentally bought a painting. It also reminds me, you know, I watched my mom used to watch the show Designing Women, so it would be on when I would be there. And one of the characters, that she goes to an art show, and at the art show, she just sets her bag down somewhere and walks off to go use the restroom. And these two people start admiring the bag. And when she comes back, her friend goes, I just sold your bag for $10,000. When asked when her next art show will be there, she says, well, you can see all my latest work at the discount section of JCPenney's, you know? It's this, we see things sometimes and we place value on it. We do this with our own religion, don't we? We look at someone and we think, boy, they've got it all together. This person has really, and we admire them, and we just say what a great person they are, and we don't realize that this person is struggling with some sort of sin, some sort of broken relationship, and we feel the need when we're put up on the pedestal. Pastors feel this way. When we're put up on the pedestal, we feel the need to kind of go along with it. Kind of like, you know, Dick Van Dyke resolving to, okay, fine, I'll take the painting in. Or this, the main character in Designing Women saying, okay, fine, they can have the bag for $10,000. So many people wish to boil down Christ's admonition here to this kind of reading. Be salt, be light, they exclaim. Even if your lives or communities are falling apart, like the old Billy Crystal line, yes, but you look marvelous doing it. Even if you look marvelous while your life is falling apart. Even if your communities are falling apart, it doesn't matter, look marvelous doing it, because, well, Christ commanded you to look good doing it. Folks, that's a misreading of this passage. And let's go through this passage so we can kind of get to grips with it. An honest reading, though, sees Christ reminding people they should do the exact opposite. Christ demands a broken heart. Because only a broken heart can be filled with God's grace. We should bear witness to a changed life from an honestly changed proclamation of Christ. This comes into focus when we remember that Christ's commands are always backed up by what? By His promises. By His promises. Christ never commands us to do something that He will not promise to do in us. God is not some deity standing at the top of some staircase that you and I have to climb up the stairs in order to reach Him, beckoning us forth. Come on, just a little further. Just work a little harder. Climb a little higher. You're almost there. He's the one on the cross. He's the one standing at the bottom, saying, no matter how far you fall, I will always be here to catch you. For many of us, we can think a lot like the Pharisees. We can see that Christ's impossible demands upon us is just one more weight for us to lift. If we read in the book of James, we understand that even the smallest infractions gets us into a world of trouble. We know from the Bible that all have fallen short of the glory of God. And so we have to ask ourselves, how are we to be salt and light? Like the people in the sitcoms, our misunderstanding is comical when we look at it from the outside. We mistake the reason why something is valuable. We think that our righteousness is valuable because it comes from us, when the Christian's righteousness is valuable because it comes from the author of all righteousness. This, of course, is the problem we face here. We are equating our purpose and our job as Christians with our value and our status in the world. There are three things we should note about salt and light. The illustration that Jesus uses here in this passage. Firstly, salt and light are known not by what they are, but what they produce in the world around them. One would not have saltless salt or lightless light. Rather, those objects are described by their very essence, by what they do. Christ is warning Christians against people who merely appear to be disciples, who look marvelous to the world, while their own worlds are falling apart. He admonishes them to not appear to be disciples without hearts turned to the Lord. To some, of course, this can cause fear. But friends, anyone who believes in Jesus and His promises knows that His perfect love in us will cast out that fear. It's not about what you do. Instead of worrying if you have done enough, you should remember Christ and that He has promised to carry your load. Remember Christ, and then you can be like Him. You are now no longer bound to the works of the law. You are bound to Christ and His works of righteousness. Secondly, salt and light are preservatives. Salt kept food from spoiling. And anyone who knows what it's like to go out in the dark, especially out here in Texas where I have to put a headlamp on to cross over to the church when I come out at night, anyone knows it's scary to go out in the dark. But light and salt, they preserve us, and they also make us feel safe. Finally, as many of you know, we've been going through the Mere Christianity, C.S. Lewis's Mere Christianity, and C.S. Lewis points out, if we were explaining salt or light to someone who hadn't experienced them, that person would assume, when we told them about salt and light, that salt or light just made everything like those things. But we know differently because we've experienced salt, we've experienced light. We know about salt and light. When used properly, salt and light bring out the flavors, or they illuminate vistas. And so too should the salt and light of the Christian Not something where people are drawn to our saltiness or drawn to our light, but rather that they can see God working in the world around them by the light, by the preserving salt in our own lives. For we flavor the world around us. We become God's preserving agent in the world around us, not in ourselves, but by Christ's righteous power indwelling inside us. And still, though, fear can creep in. It just needs a little crack to creep into our hearts, doesn't it? We can be afraid that we are failing to be salt and light in our lives, and we can then again turn our gaze away from Christ and towards ourselves, that we need to be the ones to manufacture this. And Jesus' words cease to be a gospel of freedom and become just another set of rules and regulations that we must follow in order to earn God's love. Friends, the moment you think you have to earn God's love and it's not a free gift from Christ is the moment you have turned away from Christ. The cross of Christ frees you. You've been baptized into the death of Christ. Why? So that you can rise to the life in Christ. Indeed, we can have this fear in us just by looking to ourselves. But that's not what Jesus is saying here, is it? Read the Bible. Firstly, notice that it is Christ who promises to fulfill the law or the prophecies. He says nothing about you are going to have to fulfill the law and the prophecies. He says, I have come not to abolish the law and the prophets, but to fulfill them. There's nothing you have to do anymore to measure up. I will be the one to do this. Christ will be the fulfiller of these things. This is Christ's promise to you and to me. We need not fear relaxing the law of prophecies anymore, for Christ is the one who will bear the burden for us, and He is strong enough to take anything in your life you can throw at Him. Now, don't put the Lord your God to the task, but just know He's always there, and He's big enough to handle your burdens. Secondly, Christ challenges His disciples not to have more faith in themselves, but what? To put faith in Him. Remember what He has said. When He calls the disciples, He does not say to them, be good people, or obey all righteousness. What does He say to them? Follow me. Come after me. In Hebrews we find that He is the great pioneer, the trailblazer of our faith. He has led the people through the valley of sin and death on into everlasting life in God's presence. And so He promises you and me that He will be the one who will be taking us, blazing the trail. All we have to do is follow after Him. So what does that mean for us? Do not forget that this passage follows closely on Jesus' command and invitation to follow Him. He has not changed what He has declared in the intervening time. Now, if we look to ourselves or our own works, there is no way we can live up to the facade of the scribes and the Pharisees. This passage here reflects very closely with Matthew 23, where He talks about the window dressing that the scribes and the Pharisees have. He talks in Matthew 23 about how the scribes and the Pharisees go and they'll do everything to make more scribes and more Pharisees who are just as bound to sin and death and to falling short of the glory of God as they are. But if we look to Christ, friends, if we look to Christ, we now know what He is speaking of here in this passage. Isn't that always the way? Our hearts are broken. Our hearts are broken from falling short. That's because we've taken our gaze off of Christ. We have forgotten to follow after him. And so the law and the prophets become a burden to us when Christ has promised to take that burden from us. As Christ is the one who will completely fulfill the righteous promises of the law and the prophets, those who put on Christ, or those who come after Christ, can then enter into the kingdom. That is how our righteousness exceeds that of the scribes and the Pharisees. For our righteousness is not our own, it is Christ's. And when we put on the righteousness of Christ, then we become fully righteous. If the Son has set you free, you are what? Free indeed. The sitcom situations where misunderstandings lead to embarrassing situations is something that we all fear. We are afraid of being misunderstood. We are afraid of not measuring up. We are afraid of not looking righteous enough or just enough or being obedient to the prophecies enough or in the Word enough. We all fear something. We all fear being found out as people who have bitten off more than we can chew. But the gospel tells us that our righteousness is not a work of our own, but is freely given by Christ. And here's the thing. Something which is freely given to you, abundantly overflowing more grace and mercy and righteousness than you can even begin to comprehend or hold on to. Anything given so prodigally, so overwhelmingly, that can be shared, can't it? And then you can be that city on the hill. You can be the light. You can be the salt in the community because your righteousness isn't from you. It's from Christ. It's been freely given to you. And so you can freely give it. And now, folks, here's the good news, the gospel message. Now that you do not have to fear being more righteous than the scribes and the Pharisees, won't you instead reflect the righteousness of Christ, who has brought to completion the law and the prophets for the world, and probably more importantly for most of us, in our own hearts as well. If Christ has made you free and complete, if Christ has provided the salt and the light, why don't you share that with your neighbor? Give freely. Don't hold back. Do not get in the way of the Spirit. Let the Spirit move and go out into your communities. Christ has freely given to you. And now you may freely give.